I've talked a lot about the good decks in Hearthstone, but what happens when we stop trying to win and we focus on having fun? Today is going to be a little bit of a different video because I usually like to show you guys what the best decks to climb with are, but I think I'm going to take a step in a little bit of a different direction because I want to show you guys the best decks to be having fun with in Hearthstone. And spoiler alert, a lot of these decks are going to be somewhat decent, but not all of them are going to be decks that you can really win with, in all honesty. So let's just go ahead and get this started and show you guys the first deck on this list, which is going to be Wishing Well Rogue. And this is just one of those archetypes that I feel like is unfortunately never going to be that good due to the fact that you don't have a way of really generating the random legendaries that you want. Like, at least with the Countess, you're able to discover legendaries, but with Wishing Well, you just get a legendary for a coin. And in some instances, that could be pretty good, but on average, most legendary cards are not really that good. So instead of going all in on nothing but coins, you still have Drilly the Kid as well as other excavate cards, so that way you can focus on being like a Ogre Rogue of sorts, but you still have good tempo cards like Krakatoa as well as all the draw cards in the deck in order to give this deck a little bit of sustainability, trying to keep itself going in at least some sort of direction, because you do have the miners with the shadow steps that work perfectly well, but Drilly the Kid as well as the Wishing Well are going to be the main meat and potatoes of this deck. So if you want to wish upon a star, or in this case, wish upon a wishing well, then you might be able to generate the perfect legendaries. But I will go ahead and warn you guys, all the decks that I'm showcasing today are probably not going to be decks that you want to actually try to climb to legend with, but maybe this is a fun deck to play against your friends, or to see if you can't get a couple of highlights after a couple of games. Next up is going to be a deck that is definitely not that common, but I have actually had experience trying out this archetype, and it is surprisingly a lot more powerful than you would originally think. I think the first time that I played this deck, I went 11-11 with it, but this was before the new expansion came out, so I don't know how good this deck actually feels going into the meta, but the whole point of this deck is to do a Thaddeus combo with Pyrotechnician as well as Cover Artists in order to give you more Thaddeus's for more discounts, so that way you can play any spell that Pyrotechnician gives you. And I really do believe any spell, because even if Thaddeus is on the even polarity, which is what you need him to be on in order to do the combo, you have Thaddeus at even polarity into Cover Artist into Pyrotechnician, and then you just start spamming cards. And the reason why this works is because Lifebinder's Gift is also an even card, so once you fill up your hand with a bunch of odd cost cards that you're not able to play, you can play the Lifebinder's Gift for free, discount your entire hand by 1 mana, which will turn your odd cards into even cards, therefore making the Thaddeus application actually work, so that way you can play any card that comes out of the Pyrotechnician, no matter its mana cost. However, you only have 2 Lifebinder's Gifts in the deck, so if you're able to do this once or twice, you can kind of go through the different cards that Pyrotechnician will give you, but I've already got a video showcasing this, as well as it being showcased in my most recent Trolled-in video, I guess. So if you want to see this deck in action, go ahead and check out those videos, but Fire Druid is an archetype that actually might be a lot more powerful than you would originally think. Next up, we have Big Ogre Rogue. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a big rogue deck with Scourge Illusionist and Light Thunderbringer and Neptalon, followed with the Ogre package, so that way you have some early game minions in order to help you sustain onto the board and trade into threats. But the rest of the deck is just typical good rogue cards. You have Serrated Bone, Potion Master Putricide, and all the concoction cards in order to give you that early game tempo. That's very, very valuable for rogue right now. You have Sir Finley in order to shuffle the cards that you don't want in your mulligan back into the deck somewhere. I'm wondering if we would want to put in a gear shift in this deck in order to help with the cards that we don't want at the wrong times. But most likely, Finley just by itself is going to be good enough because you have a lot of early game, so you'll just throw away the cards that you don't want, focus on early game, and try to build up that mid-game combo of the Ogre combo or the Kingpin, or I'm sorry, the Thunderbringer combo with Scourge Illusionist. So there is some potential for this deck, but again, all the decks on here are not going to be great for ladder, but this is definitely a fun deck because it's a legitimate way of using the Ogres that isn't just going all in on Ogres, because I don't believe that's how you want to play the deck. The deck needs to have something else that it can do, because Ogres are not strong enough by themselves in order to carry the archetype, but they definitely can be a win condition if you build up the game long enough. So you need some other ways of being able to scam the game, like with concoctions or with the Scourge Illusionist hitting the Thunderbringer. And if you want to try and get some maybe easy wins on ladder, you can play this deck, but this is going to be a deck that's mostly going to be catching your opponent off guard, and that's going to be the strength of this particular archetype. Next up, we have an archetype that you actually might be able to bring into ranked because Tice has been doing everything he can in order to make Sludge Temple Warlock into a thing. During one of his last streams, he went 12-4 with the archetype, pushing with a 75% win rate, and was winning by turn 5, turn 6, and high legend. Pretty much you just want to go for tempo, collect sludges, and use the discard mechanics to tempo for lethal. So enjoy the wins. Maybe this deck might be better than you think it is originally. However, I have not tried it yet, so I myself cannot speak on the validity. But just looking at this deck, I can kind of see what it's supposed to do, as well as the fact that I've actually lost against this deck twice as of my stream yesterday. So maybe there's something going on with this deck to where going for early game minions, pressuring with the Fatigue Imp archetype, as well as having, you know, Silvermoon Arcanist into Steam Cleaner be a possible way of winning the game by turn 8. Maybe this deck has a lot more validity than I'm thinking, because the curve of this deck also looks really good for an aggro deck. So there might be something going on here. I really can't see any holes in this deck, and I don't think I should be poking holes at a Tice archetype, because he just makes the perfect decks around. Like, let's be honest, he's a great content creator and a Hearthstone, I think, world champion as well. Pretty sure that he won Worlds at one point. But in any case, you got a lot of fatigue package cards in here. Furnace Fuel being good when you discard it off of cards like Waste Remover. Waste Remover being a 4-mana 7/7. I knew this card to be good in some way or another, but unfortunately Warlock by itself is kind of struggling right now. But at least this does make sense with all of the toxic barrels of sludge that you're going to be putting to the bottom of your deck. So having a 4-mana 7/7 that can also potentially deal 9 damage as soon as it's played, pretty powerful, needless to say. And then you have Scam Potential with Symphony of Sins. But if you want to try and make an off-meta deck work at top legend, then this actually might be the way to do it. Next up, we have an archetype that I tried to make popular on the first day of the expansion, because there was actually somebody that beat me on turn 5 or turn 6 with an insane Lightshow combo. Because essentially what happened is my opponent played Magister's Apprentice, played Stargazing into the Lightshow in order to find extra copies of Lightshow. He already had rewinds available, so he was able to rewind the Lightshow, but there's other possibilities of being able to Stargazing for 0 mana, play Rewind twice, because one Rewind can cast twice, and then you can get another Rewind or another Lightshow, depending on how the Stargazing works, because you could Rewind into the Stargazing. There's actually a lot of potential for this deck, but unfortunately it is also coded with the Elemental archetype, and I don't think that Elemental Mage is really going to be that good, because minions need to do more than just have value happen. Like, minions need to be doing something immediate onto the field, which means that they need to fight for tempo, not for value. So that's the difference is there. I think that there are tempo-based board decks that are definitely possible, like Peer Paladin right now, but this unfortunately does not fall into that category, because the minions are more so going for value than they are, like, for example, in Highlander Druid, going for like a dragon that deals damage. Like, you're not fighting for the board, you're just fighting for value and fighting for as many resources that you can generate. And in a deck like this, it does make sense to fight for resources, because you want the Magister Apprentice to be the game-ending combo. But overall, I believe this deck has a lot more power than people want to give it credit for, because if you do happen to hit Ashwin the Guardian onto your Magister's Apprentice, I think the game is just almost over in most situations, depending on how far the game has progressed. And Greedy Partner and Gold Panner could be a great way of getting yourself that card draw, an extra bit of mana in order to help out for the combo. And when you look at the deck, it's mostly 2-drop, so it makes a lot of sense. But this deck was made by Funky Monkey. If you want to check out his deck guide, go ahead and check out his YouTube channel in order to figure out how to actually play this deck in the most effective way. But overall, Lightshow is a card that I really wanted to be good, but unfortunately, it's just never hit the mark exactly where it needed to be. The card has either felt ridiculously good or ridiculously slow, and the fact is, at 3 mana, Lightshow just, I don't think, is going to be that meta relevant of a card. Next up, we have Excavate Secret Rogue, and this is a deck that was made by Jombre that he posted about a couple of days ago, if not yesterday, where he went 11-7 around top 20 with Secret Rogue. Greedy Partner turn 2 into Private Eye Scourge Illusionist is a really good starting curve. Fun archetype with some potential refinement. Private Eye is still a really strong card if you know what you are doing. However, there's one thing I find very interesting is that all the secret cards are not in this deck. We do not have the Ghastly Gravedigger. And I have to ask Jombray, if this really is a dig rogue, why don't we have all of the dig cards in the deck? Like, come on, man, that just makes a lot of sense. But I guess this is a little bit too slow because you only have so many secret cards, but the secret cards are not the power of this deck. It's the excavate cards. The secret cards just help you maintain value, as well as getting some decent tempo with like card draws, as well as just possible disruption with the Perjury hitting like, you know, like Objection. Hate that card, gotta say it, Objection sucks. Please don't print any more cards like that, Hearthstone. I hate Objection, and I'm pretty sure most of the community does as well. But now that we got that out of the way, this is just a typical tempo rogue deck, in all honesty, to where you have Astalor Shadow Step combos in order to threaten late game. You have the secret cards being able to be fished from your deck, played onto the field, so that way if you don't draw them, there are a lot of value that are coming your way. You still have the concoction package, but you're actually... Okay, we are running Potion Belt, never mind. So we are running all the good concoction cards with only one concoctor. Wonder what the reason is for that. But then you still have Drilly the Kid with Scourge Illusionist, which seems like a really great way of being able to get value from the Scorpion, which a lot of people on Reddit are actually wanting to buff, which is really funny because Rogue has never really had like that weak of an expansion, except for this expansion, to where the cards don't necessarily feel weak. They just don't feel as strong as some of the other cards. Like Drilly the Kid is a fantastic way of getting value from your Scourge Illusionist because you get to play it for 0 mana. And then you'll still have Queen and Krakatoa, which I don't think are ever going to leave Rogue. They're just really good for the Rogue archetypes. But overall, I think that this deck has a lot of sustaining power, but I would highly recommend checking out Jombray's stream if you want to see this deck piloted as perfectly as possible. Because this does feel like an archetype to where if you don't play it well, you are going to be throwing a lot of games. Next up, we have what is probably the wackiest archetype on this entire list, Tony Priest. The whole point of the deck is to draw throughout your deck, play Tony in order to replace your deck with a copy of your opponent's, and then you can play Mysterious Visitors in order to discount the deck by potentially 4 mana, and then you figure out how to win from there. I really don't know where this deck goes after that, but it has lots of ways of being able to draw throughout the entire deck because you have Clergy, Fan Club, and Funnel Cake, as well as Priestess Valish, in order to give you all of the synergy that you possibly can muster when it comes to drawing out your deck, doing it quickly in order to set up that Tony. And this deck even goes so far as to be running a Reno Lone Ranger, because after you deck out, you don't have any more duplicates, so you can easily throw out the Reno if you just want to equip it. But you're also going to be encountering a lot of Reno mirrors. So running this card after you do the Tony combo can still be really good, and you could potentially get a second Reno for 4 mana, so that seems pretty good in my opinion as well. But according to Odemian, the deck actually works somewhat consistently. The whole point is just to draw the entire deck by turns 5, turn 6, and set up some taunts with the Thirsty Drifter. Seems like this card would be a little bit better, but I feel like we just haven't found out the perfect list for this yet. So you want to go for the easy draws and easy taunts. Reno out by 8 if necessary in order to keep yourself alive. Then you copy the opponent's deck and reduce its cost. Steal all the cards and watch him struggle until his inevitable defeat. So you heard it from Odemian, you heard it from me. You figured out how to play Tony Priest, so let's see if we can't get some people trying out this archetype on ladder and have it work successfully. And I will go ahead and admit, I have not tried a lot of these decks. I have not tried this myself, but this does seem like a really fun way of being able to play Priest and still actually drive your opponent crazy. There's nothing that you can do when it comes to Priest and not driving your opponent crazy. It is the class that just needs to be deleted from Hearthstone. But until it gets deleted, why not have fun with Tony? Why not have fun with Mysterious Visitors? And why not have fun with a Reno in a deck that actually has duplicates? Because this is my favorite way of being able to play Highlander cards, actually, is in decks that actually do have duplicates and draw themselves very quickly. Zephyrs was a great example of this on how it doesn't really need the no duplicates clause to be fulfilled. You just got to draw through your deck fast enough in order to have your payoffs actually work out. But overall, I think this deck looks like a lot of fun. I'm probably going to be giving this a shot after my next stream, which you guys should check out the Twitter. You should see what post I'm going to be making here pretty soon talking about that. But Tony Priest seems like a really fun way to not only take your opponent by surprise, but also win some games, if you're lucky enough. Next up, we have Minecraft Rogue, as I'm referring to it from now on. If it's an excavate deck, then it is a Minecraft deck. I'm going to start this trend, so I need you guys to help me get this going. But regardless, Minecraft Rogue has been making a bit of a resurgence because a lot of people are trying to figure out what the best version of this deck is, because it's an archetype that the Hearthstone community apparently really wants to be at least somewhat valid, because it does run new cards, and it does seem like a fun way of being able to play Rogue that isn't just going all in on Draka or going in on location. So for that reason, I really want this deck to be good, but don't take it from me. Take it from Bunny Hopper. He's the one that made this. He went 77% over 13 games to top 15 legend. Try at your own risk. And he was also suggesting a Reno Blood DK, which we'll be talking about in tomorrow's video, where I go over the top 5 Reno decks that are possible, and I try to give a Reno deck for every single class in Hearthstone. But overall, this deck does seem like it does perform pretty decently. However, the matchups are spread all throughout, so it's really hard to see what this deck is good into. But the most notable thing is the fact that it went 2-0 against Demon Hunter. So if this deck can actually beat Nog and Demon Hunter, I feel like it has a lot of position in this meta to be somewhat good, or at least good enough to see play at top legend. Clearly, 2 different legend players on the EU server, both Jombre and Bunny, seem to think that there is some potential for this deck. It's just a matter of being able to find the perfect one. And if we look very closely, this is very similar to the Jombre deck. It's just we don't have secrets. Instead, we have Tez Greymane, we have a Pozic, and I believe we also have the gear shifts in order to replace the cards that we don't want. Because obviously, if you draw like your Drilly the Kid before you want to get the value from it, you might want to shuffle that card back into the bottom of your deck. You also have break dances, which I wonder what this is specifically in here for. Maybe you can break dance a crab. That actually seems like a really good idea, because if you break dance a crab, you get to play the crab, have the 4 attack claws, have the 4 attack weapon, and then if you break dance the crab, you also have a 6/5 with rush, and then you can do the crab turn all over again. So maybe break dance with crab has some actual meta applications that we aren't considering, especially if you start with like a prep bone, like prep bone into turn 4 crab into break dance. That's a really powerful turn 5. But there might be some more ways to play this deck and have some powerhouse turns you may not be considering, because I'm wondering if Scourge Illusionist actually works with Pozic. I'm not sure if I've ever seen this interaction, but having another Death Rattle does seem to make sense in a deck like this, so why not have that extra bit of consistency just in case your gear shift can't get rid of the right card. But obviously you want to hit Drilly the Kid, because Drilly gives you 3 excavates in order to really help you out with getting that Scorpion, and I can just say this right now, I've never seen the Scorpion get full 0 mana value, just because excavating 8 times is a really difficult thing for Rogue in particular, even though it does seem to have the best cards to excavate with. The problem with Rogue, it doesn't survive, so you have to be able to focus on keeping yourself alive, make sure that you have that delicate balance of developing tempo while also keeping your HP above a certain threshold. But Astalor with armor and Shadow Steps can be a great way to keep yourself alive. But if you want to check out how this deck gets played, check out Bunny Hopper's stream, see how the deck performs, and see if this is something that you would want to try, because it does seem like the Hearthstone community really wants an Excavate Rogue to be good. Next up, we have a deck that I've been wanting to make a video over. However, I just don't have enough games in order to showcase this, but it looks like a Reno deck, right? Well, you'd be somewhat right and somewhat wrong, because there are 2 duplicates in this deck, 2 Presciences and 2 Ogre Gang Aces, being the only Ogres in the deck, so that way you have ways of being able to high roll with the Kingpin Pud. We are still running Cold Storage, we are still running a Sharon Scroll in order to get extra copies of the Cold Storage, but this is essentially a control meme combo Highlander. It's got everything in it. This deck legitimately has everything, even a Pack the House in order to give you more ways of threatening onto the board. So the whole point of this deck is just to mulligan for Prescience. That's it. You mulligan for Prescience, you play it on 4, you draw your Ogre Gang or potentially your Holiday, so that way you can play Holiday on 5 somewhat consistently, because I will say that Holiday really does feel like one of the best cards from this set, especially in Highlander Shaman, which I'll be talking about in the next video, talking about the Reno decks. But overall, this deck was a lot more fun than I would have given it credit, because it really does feel like a puzzle. However, it does suck when you have Reno in hand and you have it playable, but you can't play it because you don't have the duplicates in your hand, so that is a drawback. But that's the reason why we're putting this on the fun deck video instead of the good deck video, because this is a good deck when it works. And that seems to be the overall theme of the Hearthstone decks I'm interested in, is that I want the decks that do the goofy things, but they just don't do them consistent enough in order for me to keep myself above rank 500. I'm above rank 500 right now because of Nature Shaman, and I will keep singing its praises until the deck fails me. But overall, if you want to have fun, if you want to play Ogres and then get the value from the Kingpin Pud, I would really suggest this deck. And one more thing I should say before we move on to the next deck, the reason why we are only running the Ogre Gang Ace instead of running the other cards is because, number one, it disenergizes with the prescience, so that makes a lot of sense. But overall, the main reason why we're running aces is because it has lifesteal. We want to bring back this card and keep ourselves alive. This is like a grinder control Peanut Shaman, if you remember what Peanut Shaman was back in the days of 2019 Hearthstone. But this deck is just aiming to keep yourself alive, remove your opponent's threats, and then eventually have some kind of big combo with the Kingpin to where if the minions with Wind Fury actually survive, then you can push a lot of damage. And you still have lots of tempo cards like the Holiday, like the Command of Neptulon. The Kingpin obviously gives you lots of tempo in that aspect, but you have lots of ways of keeping your opponent off the board while pushing your own game plan. So I feel like this deck has a lot of potential, but unfortunately the fact that it's a Reno deck that does have duplicates in it, it will keep it a little bit weaker than some of the other archetypes that are out there. But if you're wanting to have fun with a Highlander Shaman archetype that also plays Ogres, then this is absolutely the perfect deck for you. And the last deck that I'm going to be showing you guys is probably the wackiest deck that I have seen in Hearthstone, and this is definitely not something I'd recommend climbing in ranked with, because this deck is trying to do one specific thing in particular. But I don't want to spoil it. I actually want you guys to go to my friend Ulticon's YouTube channel and check out his most recent video, which is actually his most successful video that he has ever posted. So the whole point of this deck is to play Cattle Rustler, draw the Red Herring, so that way you can play Red Herring and Maw and Paw in the same turn to protect the Maw and Paw. Then you make copies of the Maw and Paw with Cover Artist, with Sinister Soul Cage, and there might even be a way to give the Red Herrings both stealth if you're able to play both of them. But instead of me telling you how exactly this deck works and seeing just how much value you can get from your Climactic Necrotic Explosion, I would highly recommend checking out this video. The link will be down in the description, so that way you guys don't have to worry about it. The title of the video is I Built a Stealth HP Farm. Ulticon, make sure you're subscribed, because this dude comes out with the wackiest combos that I've ever seen. And honestly, this was the kind of Hearthstone content that I originally wanted to start making, because this is the content that really gets people's brains turning, being like, how exactly can I make an epic combo like this to where we break the mechanics of the game, or we push the limits of the game to as far as it'll go. But overall, check out the video in order to see how this deck gets played, how it performs, because I'll tell you right now, you just want to play this deck against your friends, or maybe if you are crazy enough to try this on ladder and get a W with it, maybe you can get a hilarious highlight clip for yourself. But I mostly wanted to use this moment to talk about Rainbow DK, on how it's a meme deck, it's not that good, it's not that valid, no matter what deck that you're playing for it. But I also wanted to showcase Ulticon's content, because it's really awesome to see more people going for gigantic bombastic combos that truly are unique. I haven't seen anybody else pull anything even close to this since the expansion has gone live. So make sure you check out Ulticon's YouTube channel if you want the craziest, wackiest combos in all of Hearthstone. But there you go, guys. Those are my top 5 plus 5 other decks that I would highly recommend to try out if you want to play and have fun. Like, I gave you a decent amount of lists here if you want to also win some games that may be a little bit more off meta than compared to the other stuff that I have been suggesting. But I really would recommend trying out some of these decks if your goal is just to have fun with Hearthstone, cube against a friend, see who has the wackiest deck, because it's not about winning at the end of the day. It's all about having fun in Hearthstone. And if you like having fun in Hearthstone, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a comment on what you've been enjoying about in this Hearthstone expansion, as well as the deck that maybe you think should have been on this list, because maybe I'll make another list in the future. I don't know. Maybe I do. Top 5 videos seem to do pretty well in the Hearthstone community. But regardless, I hope you guys find at least one deck that you enjoy in this video. And as always, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and we'll see you for the next one.